China's economic prospects go from bad to worse. China is uninvestable. China faces critical moment in push to revive economy. Blah, blah, blah. Some media are struggling with words to paint a bleak picture of China's economy, but China saw a GDP growth of 5.2% last year, hitting the government's own target. Despite China getting a passing grade, there are indeed challenges that China is faced with. For example, the real estate sector downturn and fluctuating foreign investments. How to evaluate China's growth last year? How to make sense of the seemingly contradicting figures? I was joined from Beijing by Yao Yang, Liberal Arts Chair Professor at Peking University. Professor Yao, welcome to The Point. It's good to have you back on the show, and it's such a coincidence that last year, almost exactly at the same time, you were on my show and you were predicting the growth of the Chinese economy. You were, however, quite optimistic. You said that the Chinese economy for the year 2023 should be able to grow at least 6%, if not 8%, but we know the final number for last year was 5.2%. Were you too optimistic? What changed during the year?
It's interesting. You still remember that. That's good, right? Often the case when you can't say something, then people tend to forget what they said, before. So that's good. Yes, in a sense, we all made a mistake at the beginning of last year. I think one of the reasons was that the Chinese economy bounced back so strongly at the beginning of last year, and the people were optimistic about government policy. But I think we missed the part, very important part. I think thinking back, that the Chinese government has many objectives, not just one single, say, economic growth, right? I think in the past several years, the Chinese economy has been on a transition path, and the government put more weights on other objectives, particularly to deleverage the economy, to regulate the real estate sector, all sorts of things, right? But having said that, I would say 5.2% growth, which is already a very respectable growth rate anyway.
You said that right now China is transitioning from a previous growth model to a newer growth model, namely from one focusing on quantity to one focusing on quality. What kind of pressure, what kind of stress is that placing on the Chinese economic performance? Is that going to play out over the coming period of time? Do we have to be more realistic about growth targets over the next 5 years, let's say?
Well, I still believe, or my calculation shows, China still has a potential growth rate, at least 5.5%. That was also one of the reason I give like a 6%, right? So the Chinese economy itself has no problem. Many foreign observers say, the Chinese growth is meeting its end. Right? China is not going to catch up with the United States in terms of the size of the economy. I don't think so. China's economy still has a huge amount of potentials. What we have been seeing in the last several years is the consequence of the government's deliberate adjustments. Why the government is doing this? China's government, in a sense, is always ahead of time. China has this 5-year plans, right? So it just think in the future, the Chinese economy could move from a purely investment-driven growth model to a more innovation-based, consumption-driven economy, right? But the transition, I have to say, can be really painful, right? Probably that also explains why the growth rates in the last several years have not met our expectations. But with all the transition finished, the Chinese economy is going to become healthier and produce higher quality growth.
Give us some examples. When you say the fundamentals of the Chinese economy are good, can you give us some concrete barometers or indices to substantiate your argument? Yeah.
Oh, there are actually many. Let me just give one example, very significant one, AI. People say, hey, how can you talk about the AI? United States, of course, is the leader of AI, right? Recently, Sorrow just makes so much attention in China. Admitting that United States is still the leader of the high-tech sector, but in terms of application, in terms of real application in the economy, China is doing the best. Many people don't know actually to test whether you can use AI to boost your productivity. One good testing ground is the EV industry. In the past, EV companies compete with batteries. Now they're going to compete with driverless driving. Okay? And China has huge capacity in this area, particularly when Huawei joins. The whole industry is going to change. And so in the middle level in the technology, China is replacing advanced countries.
However, if you read the press stories, whether international press and some domestic press, there are talks of a lack of confidence. Am I right to say that for the second half of last year, for instance, the lack of confidence, for whatever reason, also contributed to the lower growth of the economy or slower consumption rates?
Well, probably the causality was just reversed, right? It was because the growth didn't meet the expectation, so people's expectation became worse, right? Last year, I mean, 5.2% was a respectable growth rate. I think the reason people's expectation was low were twofold. First, some industries actually grew really fast. Okay, so if you go to say the EV industry, ID industry, you see huge boost, right? But then if you go to other sectors like the housing sector, it's still being declining even today, right? So that's one of the reasons. Another reason was the recovery didn't meet the people's expectation, like me, right? So in the beginning, we all expected like a 6% or even higher growth rate. It didn't happen. Right? So then people say, oh, it doesn't meet my expectation, so my expectation should be lower.
Does that explain the increasing amount of savings by Chinese residents when they are not confident that life is going to get better in the very near period of time, that they're saving more, but they have money, they're just holding back the consumption?
Yeah, to some extent that's true, but we also need to notice last year consumption grew quite remarkably. Some people I remember put the growth rate of consumption at 9%. But anyway, if you look at the composition of growth last year, consumption growth contributed more than 80% of China's total growth.
Yeah, here seems a bit of contradiction. Some people put rise of consumption at 9%. The National Bureau of Statistics put last year the total retail sales of consumer goods at 7.2%. So consumption doesn't doesn't seem weak, and yet we hear the talk of lack of confidence. Is there a contradiction there?
Yeah, I think that there is a contradiction. As I said, some sectors were so good, some sectors were bad. So in most societies, bad words actually have fun, right? Have wings. So the flag father. People always hear, "Oh, I haven't earned enough money." Uh, but for those people who have earned enough money, they don't talk, right? So pessimistic mood travels much farther than good news. Okay, I think that explains a lot. We shouldn't put too much emphasis on consumption. This consumption is already growing quite respectably. We should put more emphasis on investment. Last year, investment didn't meet our expectation.
When you say investment didn't meet your expectation, what exactly do you mean? Because one story that was viral on international media headlines, mainstream medias especially, was that foreign direct investment to China collapsed, and they were basing their observation on numbers released by the competent Chinese authority in term, who are calculating the so-called direct investment liabilities for, they say, for the first time in 30 years, China's foreign direct investment performed so badly. And yet, there are other people who are pointing to other figures which do not show the kind of fluctuation. Exactly how important is the fluctuation of foreign direct investment to the Chinese economy?
The short answer is that we're small because foreign direct investment accounts for we're small portion of China's total capital formation. I think now less than 2%. We're very small. Okay, the significance is more on the media. Um, the story is the same. If you break up foreign direct investment, you're going to see in high tech area, foreign direct investment is increasing. Okay. But of course, if you look at the China as a whole, private investment also declined last year. So this is one thing. Another one is that you have to break up by region, right? The real drop of the FDI in China actually came from the United States. If you look at the European investment, European is increasing its investment in China. I heard one CEO of a large European company said, "Oh, so the government asked us to de-risk from China, but for us, de-risking means to add more investment in China because for our company, China is the only market that is still growing." So you have to separate them. If it's true foreign direct investment is leaving China, that's American investment. But we all know the reason. The reason is not economic. It's actually political because the United States has a sanction on China because the United States say, if you invest in China, we are going to attack on you, right? To avoid this kind of political risk, American investors stop investing to China.
Yeah. There was this recent documentary or longer piece by 60 Minutes by a mainstream US media to talk about China's investment environment, and they interviewed the US ambassador to China, who was talking about foreign capitals fleeing China because of the worsening market. But when the journalist went and talked to individual managers of American businesses here in China, for instance, the growing number of Starbucks here in China, on the mainland, or the CEO of Disney, who told the American journalist that their business in China is thriving. So why
Yes.
there are these kind of different narratives, and basically all incorporated in the same U.S. Production, in the same U.S. journalistic piece?
Yeah, actually, 60 Minutes consulted me before they came to China to shoot the documentary. Um, I think Mr. Burns was disillusioned, right? That was wrong.
The U.S.
Foreign
ambassador to
companies
China.
Yeah, foreign companies are not leaving China. If it happened, and mostly American companies and some Japanese companies, I have to admit. But if you look at the European companies, no, European companies are adding more investment into China, right? Uh, Even among American companies, the number is really, really small. We can say that our American companies start investing more in China, but it doesn't mean that they are leaving China.
Finally, let me get to the trade number very quickly. There are some, again, media reports about China trying to shape global trade to its terms, and odd talks of China's trade dropping, foreign trade dropping as well. China's exports did grow at 0.6% year on year last year. That's according to official numbers. So how good or how bad is that number?
That's actually in terms of RMB. In terms of US dollars, as China's export declined by, I think, about 6%. Okay, because of the appreciation of dollar. Okay. Um, so by international comparison, it's not that bad because the whole world trade volume declined by 5% last year. Anyway, okay. Um, you know, China's export is in transition. I think the assertion that China is reshaping its global trade is wrong. It's actually the United States political moves are actually reshaping China's export markets, right? So to respond to American sanctions and also high tariffs put on Chinese exports, Chinese companies are investing heavily in other countries, right? To some extent, it was bad for China because in the short run, Chinese companies have to make all the adjustments, and the costs of those adjustments are high. But in the long run, it's going to be good for China in the long run because in the end, China is going to be like Japan or United States to create, I don't know, one fifth of China outside China anyway. Okay. So I don't think American moves trying to decouple with China is going to succeed in the end. It's going to hurt the United States in the end. I'm confident on that.
Yao Yang, Liberal Arts Chair Professor at Peking University. Many thanks.